So when I was looking for maps to put on my bad map list, I came across a lot of maps that didn't really feel like they were terribly made, but they still weren't very fun to play. So let's take a look at some of the most annoying or frustrating or just rage-inducing maps. Starting with a map called Ab Ends Lock. And we're already off to a great start with 67 downvotes to 6.5 upvotes. So okay, you launch yourself out onto this wide open platform, and then there's just a bunch of holes. And you just have to fall down, I don't even know how many layers in this hole. And there's these stupid railings on every single level, making it nearly impossible to just fall straight down through all of it. If you're lucky, you'll just sort of tumble all the way down to the bottom of this pit. But then, if you make it all the way to the bottom, you also have to get lucky to not land upside down. So needless to say, this map can be very frustrating to play. But now let's take a look at a map called Spacey Slider. This one is actually super weird in a lot of ways. I mean, first off, it's a very interesting theme to the level, with all these different textures and being out in space. So you spawn basically on the side of this big block, and you're already sliding right off. If you have no inputs, you're just gonna fall right off the map. But you kind of just have to like slowly skid down this wall ride and then crawl into this tiny little gap without getting knocked right out. And man, I cannot explain why this map is so difficult, but I have to give it a little bit of respect at least for being original. But the next one is not so friendly, called Autism 2. Now this is another super short and pretty simple map, but it's just so much harder than it looks. So you've got to do this side transfer from this ramp over to the back side of a wall ride, which is already pretty awkward to land on, but you've got to keep some speed and then be able to swing yourself back to the left, clearing this gap and then making it through the finish. It's pretty awkward, and it looks like not very many people have even managed to finish this one. Alright, next we have Can You Jump It? Now, I'd say one of the most frustrating things you can have in a Trackmania map is having some obstacle that feels completely luck-based to get past. So you've got to throw yourself at this pole, and then just hope that you come out on the other side with any speed, and you need a decent amount of speed to be able to clear the next gaps to make it through the finish. And so you're just going to end up throwing yourself at this little pole over and over and over again, hoping that you can have some sort of clean landing on the other side, but most of the time it's just going to be really sloppy. It's really frustrating when it's like you know what a perfect run is supposed to look like, but yet you just cannot figure out how to make that perfect run happen. Oh, and here's another very well-loved map called Very Hard 41. You know, I think that pretty much any map that requires overwalls is just bound to be hated by just about everybody. So here, all you do is drive straight through and then try and ram into a wall in some way that will allow you to clear it and maybe reach the finish line. And wow, that was actually incredibly close to being a perfect run, but of course I had to get messed up. But you know, they really don't make maps like they used to. So many of these are like more than a decade old. So many of these maps came from like before TM2 was even a thing. But if that wasn't frustrating enough for you, let's take a look at Krusty Stunt number 4. Now this is another overwall map, except this one you have to clear a pretty long gap. You know, I just have to wonder if you're playing a map like this and let's say your mom walks in while you're playing this map and she just watches you driving a car into a wall and then resetting, and just doing that every 3 seconds over and over again. Just drive into a wall and then restart, and then drive into a wall and then start over and do it again. I feel like if your parents weren't already concerned about you, they probably are now. But if you ram into the wall a couple hundred times, you might get one lucky jump that'll take you over to this other pathway, and then you can just build up some speed and drive yourself into the finish line. Definitely not one of my favorites. The next one's kind of a mix between the last few maps, where you've got to drive straight into a pole and use that to try and overwall. Now this one can actually be pretty interesting if you can get a clean run. If you hit it just right, it'll flip you right over and you can use the boosters to go in through the finish. But usually, just like the last ones, you're just ramming yourself into a pole over and over again and getting very unpredictable and usually terrible results. Alright, let's look at one called Good Luck. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of finish lines, so it shouldn't be too hard. And to be honest, it's not very hard to finish, but you're kind of just throwing yourself into this bumper pit and hoping that it bounces you off somewhere. I don't really even know what's the optimal way of hitting a finish line. Like, I don't even remember what my best time looked like on this map, and it becomes really difficult to remember the best way when there are all these different options of places you can fly, but usually you just end up in the same spot over and over again. Oh boy, here's one called Infernal Lol. Now at first this map seems pretty normal. I mean, there's this really dumb jump at the start, which you just barely don't have enough speed to get past cleanly for some reason. But alright, if you get past that, then you just drive up and around this ramp, you think you're on your way to the finish line, and then you see this little gap where you see that there's a checkpoint on the other road, and you know you need to hit that checkpoint, but how are you supposed to get over there? So the only way to clear this is to go up this ramp into the wall and somehow get past this. I don't know, even just looking at it right now, it doesn't make sense sense to me, like how this is supposed to work. I mean, watching my replay kind of surprises me that I pulled it off. But yeah, I really don't know what the point of this was. Alright, let's take a look at Lil Tricky 32. Now this is one that I would almost call a true LOL map. I'm gonna have a series for those soon too. Because you know, usually true LOL maps just involve you just kind of launching yourself out towards the finish line and hoping for the best. So you go full speed and hit this bump, you're gonna flip no matter what, so you just gotta hope that you can keep control when bouncing off the second bump. But then when you see the finish lines, they're like behind the road. Now don't get it mixed up, you're not actually supposed to fly over the ramp and land in the finish line normally. You're just supposed to know exactly how to bug through the track, which I mean, I think most players are familiar with how to clip through the little green border, but it still feels a bit random. I mean, I think that the main theme for this whole video is just maps where you're just kind of hoping to get a lucky bounce off of something. But if you do get lucky, you can have a very smooth run where you just slip right in through the track and go right into the finish line. Alright, here's one called Macrobat. Now this is actually a pretty well-liked map. There's quite a few upvotes on it, but I just find this one so frustrating because I think you have to just chain together like 3 stunts where you hit this little ledge to flip over the wall and then keep it smooth, you know, landing cleanly. And I do get a clean first jump every once in a while, and then maybe a second clean jump, but once it gets to the third, like doing it 3 times in a row just feels so inconsistent. So it's a whole lot of just hitting a bump and hoping you land clean. But now we've got a map called Pain. That's a sign it's gonna be a good one. And here we go again of just blindly launching yourself off into the distance, hoping to launch yourself all the way up to the next platform. Now maps like this, I do say they're frustrating, but that doesn't mean that I won't play maps like this over and over again, because sometimes I just get obsessed with just desperately wanting a clean run, so I'll keep playing it over and over again, and that's kind of what makes it frustrating. But here I made it all the way to the other side and then turtled. But then I made it all the way to the other side and landed upright, and I've got to drive across this checker pattern for some reason. It's kind of a weird way to finish, but at least you have the checkpoint reset if you really need it. Overall, just kind of a strange map. Alright, here's a map called Silly, and this one's a little bit different than the ones we've looked at, because at first glance this map looks super normal. You just drive straight down and you just gotta go really fast. It's mainly just a full speed map, jumping yourself into the finish. But you'll notice that even when driving nearly perfectly, you're gonna have a hard time getting anywhere far away from like 17 seconds. Whereas the top of the leaderboards, there's all these 7-second runs. And the reason for that is you're kind of just expected to land this perfect Uber bug and launch yourself through this major shortcut back up towards the finish. And when you have a map that's this old and has had this many people play and get on the leaderboards, it's made the leaderboards so tight that if you want to get any sort of like decent rank on the map, you're just gonna have to figure out the Uber bug. And I did get one to trigger here, but it didn't quite take me in the right direction. So yeah, I think a map like this wouldn't necessarily be on the frustrating list if it was like a brand new map, but sometimes maps can be frustrating just because of how tight the leaderboards are. Alright, we're almost through these. Now we're looking at Trick Track. Now this is another one where it's like there's only one checkpoint and there's all this extra road, and so you see all this road and you're like, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be driving all this. This seems like a big waste of time to go through the whole track. And so you're definitely looking for a cut, but the cuts seem just super awkward to make as well. Like you can skip over at the start, or you can try and go around at the bottom. Like there's clearly something that you're supposed to be doing to make it faster, but again, the frustrating part is figuring out how to land it smooth, I guess. And here we've got Valley Grass Slide Mini number 2. Now this one I really just don't understand. So it starts off with a grass slide launch, which it's fine. It's a little bit awkward, and it's pretty rare that I get it to go clean. But then it turns around and goes for a second jump, which I have no idea what the setup really is for this, because it'll launch you into the ceiling piece, and I've seen a lot of ceiling pieces like this before where hitting it at just the right angle will basically get you to land in just the right way to grass slide when you land, but I cannot figure out what that angle is, because every time I jump into the ceiling, it refuses to ever give me a good setup for the second grass slide, and you need a good grass slide on the second one to be able to reach the finish line. And so I always just end up bouncing off the ceiling, landing in an awkward spot, and killing the run. Now, I'm usually fine with some trial and error in maps like this, but I don't like when the trial and error part happens 20 seconds into the map. It kind of sucks when you get a really clean run through the first half, driving through all the obstacles perfectly, and then it's like, well, hope the second half works out, and then it never does, and it all just goes to waste. But now it's time for the final map of the video, and that is the worst downhill staircase map you've ever seen. And this one's pretty self-explanatory. You're just driving through these grass hills that are extremely awkward to drive through. It's not very flat, you're just bouncing all over the place. Luckily, I do not think this grass is actually grass, because you're getting a lot more grip than you ever would on grass. I think that if this was actually grass, this map would be almost impossible. Well, that'll do it for the first video in the frustrating and annoying map series. I have quite a few map series like this planned out, but the terrible map series and the frustrating map series will definitely be the most prevalent. Those are the ones that I have the most maps lined up for. But anyways, let me know which ones you think really belong here and which don't, and I will see you next time.